Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into this book, The Illusion of Feminine Progress, by Conrad Reicher.
Oh, yeah.
You sent this in, and it seems like you're really interested in, like how societal changes are impacting men, especially when it comes to this whole like red pill philosophy and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this book is really interesting. It kind of, digs into some of the anxieties that men are feeling today. And it uses this really interesting concept of the red pill, just like in the movie The Matrix.
Oh, right.
That whole red pill, blue pill choice. And Riker uses that as this kind of metaphor for like waking up to the realities of like gender dynamics and
Yeah.
societal structure.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that for a lot of the men who connect with the red pill idea, it's a lot about seeing how traditional masculinity seems to be maybe declining and how that's impacting their lives.
Exactly. And I think Riker argues that society has become increasingly feminized. And he uses some really interesting examples to illustrate this point. Like, remember Fred Flintstone?
Oh, yeah.
The classic, working class dad.
Yeah.
And he compares him to male characters in shows like The Big Bang Theory. And he argues that the media often shows men as incompetent or even villainous these days.
Okay, so how does this tie into this masculinity crisis that Riker talks about?
Well, he suggests that men are struggling with their identity because those traditional roles that they used to have, like provider, protector, those things are being eroded.
Right.
And he even tells the story of Mike, this guy who was like a star athlete in school, but he just felt lost as an adult, like the world no longer valued his strengths.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of men can relate to. What's interesting is that he links this directly to men's mental health.
Yeah.
He brings up the statistic that men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women.
Wow.
Is he saying that that's all down to societal expectation?
Well, I think a big part of his argument is that men are discouraged from being vulnerable or seeking help.
That makes sense. It's like there's this pressure to be strong and silent, which doesn't really allow space for expressing emotions or, seeking help when you need it.
Right.
But is he saying that we need to go back to some old-fashioned idea of what it means to be a man?
I don't think so. I think he acknowledges that things need to evolve.
Okay.
But he's highlighting the potential consequences of throwing out traditional roles and values completely.
Yeah.
I think he's saying we need to find a balance.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
And it's not just personal lies he's talking about. He also claims that boys are being disadvantaged in the education system as well.
Yeah, he even suggests that schools aren't designed for how boys learn best, and that there aren't enough positive male role models in education.
He talks about this boy who thrived after switching to a single-sex school.
Yeah,
That's a pretty radical solution, isn't it? I mean, could that even work for everyone?
that's a big question. And it leads to this bigger debate about whether the current system is really failing guys, and if so, what the alternatives might be.
Now, he doesn't stop there. He goes on to say that there are systemic biases against men, especially in family courts. He even uses the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case as an example of how accusations can impact a man's life.
That's right. And he cites statistics suggesting that mothers are often favored in child custody cases.
Wow.
And that alimony can be a huge financial burden for men.
It almost sounds like he's suggesting that there's this presumption of guilt against men in certain situations.
He uses some pretty strong language here.
Okay.
He actually refers to it as a war against men.
Wow.
Playing out in courts, in the media, and even in everyday life.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. I'm really curious to hear more about this war against men and how he thinks it's affecting society as a whole.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a good place to pause for now and pick it up in the next part.
I agree. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
I think diving into the specifics of his argument will be really illuminating.
Sounds good. We'll be back to dig deeper into the illusion of feminine progress after a quick break.
So this war against men that Riker describes, it's really central to his argument.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. How does he actually define this war? This is a pretty provocative term.
Well, he points to this idea of a victim narrative that's become really prominent.
Okay.
And he says it often overlooks men's struggle. He even uses the hashtag #MeToo movement as an example.
Okay.
While he acknowledges its importance,
Yeah.
he questions whether it sometimes goes too far and silences men.
I see where he's coming from. It's like he's saying we need to be careful not to shut down men's perspective, even as we're trying to address legitimate concerns about harassment and abuse.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he's not saying that we should dismiss women's experiences at all.
Right.
But he is urging us to consider that maybe there are multiple victims in some situations, and that men's pain is often ignored.
I'm starting to see how he links all of this back to the mental health crisis we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. He argues that this dismissal, combined with societal expectations that men should just be strong and silent, contributes to the higher suicide rates among men.
That's a pretty sobering thought. It makes you realize how much these unspoken expectations can really weigh on people.
Yeah, and he goes even further.
Yeah.
He talks about the fatherless epidemic and how growing up without fathers is affecting society, especially boys.
What's his take on that?
He connects fatherlessness to issues like crime, poverty, and even problems in education. He's a big advocate for fathers being more involved in their children's lives.
You know, when you lay it all out like that,
Yeah.
it's pretty clear how he connects all these different pieces, you know, from individual struggles to societal trends. But so far, we've mostly focused on the problems. Does he offer any solutions?
He does. He actually spends a good chunk of the book exploring what he calls the reclaiming of masculinity.
Okay. I'm interested. What does that look like?
Well, he talks about the importance of positive male role models,
Okay.
both historical figures like Theodore Roosevelt and modern day figures like Jordan Peterson.
Those are some pretty diverse examples.
Yeah, and it seems like he's saying that men need to step up and become leaders, mentors, and role models for the next generation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those broader societal trends he was talking about? Does he address those?
He does, and this is where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
He dives into this concept called hypergamy,
Okay.
which he describes as women's natural inclination to seek out partners who have higher status resources and offer more protection.
It's like that old saying, women want a man who can build a house, not just live in one.
Exactly. And he even uses the Flintstones as an example,
Wow.
pointing out how Wilma is always pushing Fred to be more successful.
So is he saying this is all women's fault?
No, not quite. He argues that this drive is natural for women,
Okay.
but that it's been amplified by the feminist movement, which encourages women to focus on their careers and financial independence.
I can see how that could create tension if men are feeling like their traditional roles are being undermined while also facing pressure to achieve more than ever before.
It's exactly the conflict he highlights.
Right.
He suggests that this is leading to unhappiness for both men and women.
Okay.
Women are always striving for more, never feeling content, and men are feeling inadequate and resentful because they can't keep up.
Wow, that's quite a cycle. But where does this leave us? What does Riker propose we do about all this?
That's a good question, and it's something we'll delve into further in the next part.
Okay.
He doesn't offer simple solutions, but he does lay out a path for men to navigate this new landscape and reclaim their masculinity in a way that works for them.
Sounds like we've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back after a quick break to explore the solutions Riker proposes in The Illusion of Feminine Progress. All right, so we're back, and we're ready to unpack this final part of The Illusion of Feminine Progress. We've talked about, you know, the problems that Riker lays out.
Right.
This war against men and the challenges to traditional masculinity.
Yeah.
Now let's get into what he actually suggests men can do about it.
Well, he calls it reclaiming masculinity, but it's not about, like, you know, going back to the old ways or anything like that. It's more nuanced than that. I think what he's saying is men need to understand the forces that are at play and then consciously choose how they want to define themselves.
So it's not about fitting into this predefined box,
Right.
but about kind of actively creating a new definition.
Exactly. And he talks about this thing called the sexual marketplace.
Okay.
And it's basically this idea that dating and relationships are kind of like a market
Okay.
where men and women are competing for partners.
Okay.
And he argues that, you know, it's become harder for men to navigate this because of this double standard where they're expected to be strong, but also sensitive, assertive, but not aggressive.
It's like they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Exactly. And he suggests that this confusion is causing a lot of men to just withdraw from relationships completely.
Right.
He even touches on social media and how that's making things even more complicated
Oh, yeah.
by presenting these unrealistic ideals.
I can see that. It's like everyone's trying to present this perfect version of themselves online, and it's hard to know what's real anymore.
Yeah, and it's not just relationships either. He applies this idea of shifting landscape to the workplace too.
Okay.
Riker argues that many workplaces have become kind of feminized
Okay.
with policies that actually disadvantage men, even if unintentionally.
Okay. So how does he back that up?
Well, he points to things like flexible work arrangements and diversity quotas.
Okay.
And he says, you know, these were often meant to be positive changes,
Right.
but they've ended up pushing men aside, making it tougher to advance in their career.
It's almost like the very things that were supposed to create equality are now creating a new kind of imbalance.
That's exactly his point, and he talks about this growing number of men who are choosing to opt out of the workforce altogether
Wow.
because they feel like this system is rigged against them.
That's a pretty extreme reaction.
Yeah.
Is he saying that men should just give up?
No, not at all. He actually stresses the importance of men stepping up and taking on leadership roles,
Okay.
but in a way that's authentic to them, not just conforming to what society expects.
So it's about finding that balance again. Like we were talking about earlier, embracing strength and assertiveness, but also compassion and empathy.
Right. He seems to be advocating for a more holistic view of masculinity. He even discusses the concept of male emasculation,
Okay.
where men are stripped of their power and their self-worth.
It seems like what he's saying is that the pendulum has swung too far in one direction, and now we need to find a way to kind of bring it back to the center.
Exactly. And he's not just talking about individual men here.
Yeah.
He ties this back to fatherhood. And he argues that these societal shifts are making it harder for men to be good fathers.
How so?
Well, he points to things like high divorce rates, single motherhood, and bias against fathers in family courts.
Okay.
And he's basically saying it's creating a generation of fatherless children, which leads to all sorts of problems for society.
So what's the answer? How do we fix this?
Well, he advocates for reforming the family court system to make it more fair for fathers
Okay.
and encouraging shared parenting.
Oh.
He also emphasizes the need for positive male role models, not just in families, but in society as a whole.
It's interesting that he links all these seemingly disparate issues, from sitcom dads to family courts to the way men are portrayed in the media, and ties them all back to this core idea of redefining masculinity.
Yeah, it's a pretty ambitious argument for sure,
Yeah.
but it definitely gives you a lot to think about.
Absolutely. So for our listeners who are, diving into this topic, where do they go from here?
Well, reading The Illusion of Feminine Progress is a great start. Riker offers a lot of food for thought.
Yeah.
And it's sure to spark some interesting conversation. You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a really fascinating conversation, and we hope you've come away with some new insights into this complex and ever-evolving topic.